You're listening to another episode of the Coaster101 podcast. I'm Andrew Stillwell, and this week we are going to be talking a little bit about one of the newest attractions at America's Rock and Roller Coast. Not actually a roller coaster itself, but as part of the park's 150th anniversary, they announced a new attraction, the Snake River Expedition. And for those of you who are unaware, it's almost this Jungle Cruise-esque river adventure through Cedar Point and the back area over there back by Millennium Force. I'm joined on the podcast this week by two guys who can describe that far better than I just did. Please welcome to the podcast Billy Boyd and Brad Stivers from the Weber Group. Gentlemen, welcome to the podcast. How's it going?
It's great. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. And, Brad, you're a creative director for the Weber Group, and Billy, you're a technical project manager. Brad, I will start with you. I mean, how long have you been at Weber Group, and, what are some attractions you've worked on in the past?
Sure. I've been with Weber about 8 years now, full time. I used to be a mural artist and contracted with Weber painting murals for them about 3 years prior to that. So that's how I came to be with Weber. And I've worked on Copperhead Strike, Invader at Busch Gardens. I did a lot of stuff for Great Wolf Lodge. So Those are probably some of the big ones.
Perfect. And Billy, same question?
I started at Weber about 8 years ago, doing 3D modeling and a little bit of architectural work, and then kind of evolved into a technical role. Most of what I've been working on, Copperhead Strike as well, and then did some work for NASA for a while for their astronaut training experience.
Very cool. Well, let's get right into it with Snake River Expedition. Obviously, this is a project that is very large in scope. It's like a full 20-minute experience. It's got the boat adventure. It's got a queue. But what elements of the attraction did Weber Group work on specifically? Was it a complete top to bottom? You guys did everything, or how did that work?
So Cedar Point has their own kind of design and production team as well. So a lot of the interior queue line was done by Cedar Point, as well as like a lot of the copy for the signage. But Weber Group took care of all the scenes that are throughout the river ride, and we clad all the boats as well.
Okay, perfect. I've seen pictures of the boats, and I love that they've got like nods to this kind of extended Cedar Fair universe. I know there's a crate on one of the boats that's for the J.R. Helms Mining Company that's down at it's a nod to the Carolina Gold Rusher down at my home park at Carowinds.
Well, there's another Carowinds nod in there.
They're big on those kind of hidden nods to other parts of their park. So I know you'll see in there that there's a nod to the Rise and Shine Jam that's at Copperhead Strike. There's signage for that. They reference a lot of other rides in other parks throughout the attraction.
Oh man, now I got to get up there and like take all the pictures and do all the deep dives. But what was the working with Cedar Point? What was kind of the design process and storyboarding like, and how did the Snake River Expedition concept kind of evolve over time?
So yeah, they came to us with sort of a loose storyline in place, and obviously they had just opened. We had just finished working on Forbidden Frontier with them on Adventure Island, and so this kind of ties in somewhat to that. So they came to us right after we had finished working on Forbidden Frontier with sort of a loose storyline, and then I would get with Billy and some of our other folks and start developing kind of what the interactions were going to be, what the tech elements were going to be on, and how to bring that story to life. And then I would start doing some drawings to kind of represent those individual scenes.
Got it. And, for those who may not be aware of what's going on in Snake River Expedition, what's kind of the overarching storyline here? What's going on, and how does it involve? It involves the Forbidden Frontier on Adventure Island, right?
Correct.
Yeah, it's basically you're part of a smuggling operation. Like you get on the boat to help them get goods to Forbidden Frontier. So clearly, like some stuff happens along the way, but that's the premise at least.
Okay, very cool. When I interviewed Adam McIntyre about Bird Farm, he was telling me that the park kind of came to you guys with an idea saying, we're building this, have fun with it. I mean, Was it kind of the same experience for Snake River Expedition? Like, we've got a loose story, and here's our budget. See what you guys can come up with, and what you can make work, and what you can't make work. I mean, how was that process?
I would say similar at first, but particularly with this project, since it involves their live entertainment division, there was a little bit more back and forth between Cedar Fair and us about what was going to work and what wasn't. But yeah, that initial kind of steps were, here's a loose idea. We just started throwing stuff out there to them. And we initially started as just doing the show set, and that evolved into doing sort of the animated props and the show production and kind of doing the whole thing.
Okay. And I mean, this is, again, it's like a 20-minute, I've seen videos, again, need to get up to Cedar Point myself. It's a 20-minute full-on experience. How does this compare in scope to anything Weber Group has done in the past? I mean, it's, you guys did the theming for Copperhead Strike and Invader, and you've done some work at Great Wolf Lodge. But as far as one single attraction, how is the scope for this attraction? How does it compare to what you guys have worked on in the past?
I would say it's fairly significant, but Billy can speak to this. I would say probably some of the largest scope is what we did for Kennedy Space Center in terms of an overall attraction with the Astronaut Training Center. So I don't know.
Yeah, in terms of like duration, I mean, that's a multi-day kind of thing. So you're having to keep people engaged for 20 hours or so. So, duration, we've been there before. But again, this is an intensive kind of thing. So, you're having to get moment by moment and keep people engaged and have a lot of material. And there's a very tight storyline, and there are live actors, as part of it. So, from an integration standpoint, it's very, very intense. So even though it's not in duration, maybe at the top end of what we've done, it had its own challenges for sure.
Absolutely. Okay. It's a podcast in the year 2021, so I have to ask a question about COVID-19 because I don't think you can have a podcast otherwise without asking those questions. Obviously, COVID-19 it pushed everything back a year. Obviously, Cedar Point is having their 150th anniversary and their 151st year. Were there any benefits to having the additional year for you guys to work on it, or was kind of work paused during all of that 2019, 2020 when everything else was closed? I mean, were there any benefits rather than challenges when COVID-19 was concerned to kind of have that extra time?
I think there were certainly benefits, and I think particularly on Cedar Fair's side, like they were able to really reevaluate and look at what was happening with the ride and the experience. And over the course of that year, there were some changes in the storyline and how things were being presented, and they were able to get a lot more from their D&P department to kind of build out the queue line and the experience.
Gotcha. So. Now I need to know, like, what were some of the changes? Are you allowed to tell me about those?
I don't think anything was necessarily like a huge change. It was more like additions, like finding those areas that were a little soft in terms of impact and just adding to those.
Got it. Okay. And Billy, I know you did a lot of work with the animatronics, and based on my knowledge of what Weber Group has kind of put out in the theme park space and the attractions industry, you guys aren't necessarily, when people think of animatronics, they don't necessarily think of Weber Group. I mean, that could be a correct or incorrect assumption. How many animatronics did you guys do for the Snake River Expedition, and kind of what was can you talk about the creation process for those?
Yeah. Well, there were more than 30 individual like animatronic elements, almost 40. And those are spread out across, 12 scenes that were spread out over a 20-acre area that involved like stuff that's in the water and stuff that's on land. And, these are scenes that are going to be interacting with live actors. So you have, certain safety concerns to take into account there. And so, yeah, for us, it was definitely a challenge. We've done some animatronic work, but this is the largest animatronic scope that at least I've been involved in. And so there was definitely like a volume challenge, just getting, all the elements communicating and working and dialed in and looking good. So yeah, it was definitely interesting to figure out. It just came with a lot of unique challenges dealing with mostly environment, outside with a lot of water and human interaction, that kind of stuff.
Gotcha. And what are some of these? You said almost 40 animatronics. I mean, what are we talking here? Are we talking animals? Are we talking set pieces? What are some of the animatronics you worked on?
Yes to all. So we have and it's not just animatronics. I guess the to not give away too much, there's a lot of interactivity in the queue experience.
Okay.
So if you go up there and check it out, be prepared for some interesting stuff happening in the queue that I wouldn't classify as animatronic, but there's some motion, there's some interactivity and stuff there. And then even when you're on the boat, some of that continues. Then throughout, we have a lot of animals. I would say 2/3 of everything we did there was animals moving around and doing stuff. Some of which used like jets. I mean, we had some fun stuff in there, but we have buildings that actually move, and then we have some sort of human-looking elements, and we have a lot of water effects. Like we have like gun splashes in the water, and we have like water sprays and splashes, and just a ton of stuff. And then some that are like multi-part pieces of the same sort of animatronic scene that all kind of have to coordinate with each other. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff there, and there's a lot of different types of stuff there.
Got it. I mean, this is, to use the most layman's terms here, is this kind of like, in your eyes, is this like Great Movie Ride meets Jungle Cruise in terms of interaction with entertainment, team members, animatronics, story-driven attraction?
I feel like that's a pretty good analogy.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's pretty spot on. I think it reminds me a lot of Great Movie Ride in some ways.
I love it. Well, now that Great Movie Ride's gone, I'm glad that we have the spiritual successor that the Weber Group has worked on. And you mentioned the various scenes. I think you said there were 12 scenes in the ride that you guys worked on. Is that the correct number?
Yeah, that's a rough number. There's some sub scenes and stuff like that, but yeah.
Got it. Well, if with so many scenes, and I bring this up just because I use the Jungle Cruise analogy, and they're currently undergoing a refresh at the Disney parks. If one needed to be, replaced or repaired or kind of reimagined, how easy would that be for you guys, and how would the average guest even know what was going on, or like how long it would take you to kind of revamp that scene?
Mm-hmm. Well, the way we did our sort of infrastructure out there is very modular. So each scene kind of has its own service and driver area that's all accessible and laid out so that you can add, subtract, and change with individual service sort of in each location. It was sort of a necessity based on the scale. The water that we're piloting around in is a natural feature. So we're kind of by default having to like provide service, to that area in a distributed way just to get to everything. So yeah, it's fairly modular. I think it's updatable.
And certainly, I mean, fortunately, since Cedar Point is a seasonal park, that allows you to get in and replace stuff in the off season fairly easily. We're not dealing with after hours trying to get everything done and finished and that.
No giant spotlights and people seeing what's going on at night. So that's good.
Yeah.
The construction process, you mentioned it was modular. Were you guys building the elements and the show scenes kind of at your facility in the Louisville Metro, or is it more of an on-site build, or was it a combination of both?
A combination of both, but I would say primarily elements were built in our shop here, and Cedar Point has their own approved carpenters that we need to use. So a lot of times we will build everything in our shop, ship it up to them for the install. So there are some elements that need a little bit more on-site install and carpentry work, like there's one facade element kind of about midway through the attraction that we built some of that in the shop, but there had to be a lot of carpentry work on site to get that finished out.
Gotcha. When I talked with Adam about Copperhead Strike, there was some manufacturing versus things you guys sourced for props. How much of the attraction was kind of manufactured versus how much was sourced from the magical Weber? I don't want to call it a junkyard, but the magical Weber prop yards around rural Ohio and Kentucky.
Sure. I mean, I would say there's a fair amount that was sourced. I mean, probably 20. And really a lot of that is just stuff that's just adding kind of frosting to the surface of stuff we've built, just kind of giving things a little bit of flavor. So most of the major elements, I'd say, were all fabricated in our shop, and then we
Okay.
were just kind of adding a little bit of that kind of icing on top with the propping.
Okay, very cool. And how obviously I'm talking to the two of you guys, but this seems to like it be a massive undertaking for the Weber Group to create an attraction of this scale. How big was the team that was working on Snake River Expedition for you guys?
I mean, at any point it could have been up to 30 or so folks, but it definitely touched all of our departments. We have carpentry, art department, fiberglass, automotive paint, sign, metal shop. So it really touched all those departments, and particularly with the on the tech side. So yeah, I think most people here got to touch at least some part of it, and not only just that, also includes all the design and production folks up at Cedar Point that work for Cedar Point, and the carpentry crews up there. So it was a pretty substantial effort for sure.
Absolutely, all hands on deck.
Yeah, absolutely.
No pun intended for the boat ride, but all hands on
No,
deck.
not at all.
I want to we touched on it a little bit at the beginning of the show, but did you guys get to throw in any Easter eggs that the average guest might not know, but you kind of can be like, it's the Weber Group version of a hidden Mickey, I guess is the best way to put it. Is there anything in there that you got to install that you're particularly proud of from an Easter egg standpoint?
Well, I'm sure our artists always love to do that, and it's probably a lot of inside jokes with them and sort of to kind of hidden things for their relatives or friends, whoever who are going through there. But as we touched on earlier, I know that Cedar Fair, there's a lot of Easter eggs throughout there, kind of referencing other parks, older attractions from Cedar Point. So there's definitely a lot to see and pick up.
I want something sharp-eyed to catch. There's a scene that a bunch of little animals have taken over some instruments and are trying to play them. There's a fox that if you're sharp-eyed, you might catch a little Easter egg on. Yeah, so there's a little something there.
Ooh, that's so mysterious. You can't even give away the details. Okay.
Yeah.
Added value. Check it out.
In that same scene, that's a good. The elk. There's an elk in that scene, which was from the original Paddleboat Excursion at Cedar Point, and so that was sort of the basis for all the other animals that are on the scene. That was when we were first talking with them about it. That elk is what. This was part of the original attraction. This is kind of the level that we want all the other animals to be moving at and look at. So keep an eye out for him, because he is the kind of the basis for all the other animals.
Got it. I mean, are there any other kind of nods to that original Paddleboat Excursion?
There are a couple other ones that they have throughout, and I'll kind of save those for as you go through it. But you can kind of watch I think there's YouTube kind of POVs for both the old Paddleboat Excursion and this new one, so you can compare and contrast if you like.
I love it. And I've got to ask, and you may or may not be allowed to tell me at this point, a phrase that the design community likes to use is value engineered, which essentially means something got cut from the budget. Working under a budget is difficult, and if you have all these grandiose ideas, obviously not everything makes it to the final version of the attraction. What was something that got value engineered from Snake River Expedition that you really wish had made it into the ride?
I'm actually struggling to think.
I know, surprisingly, very little was VE'd out of this project. It's probably one of the first ones that I've worked on where we were able to kind of price it out in budget and get everything made for what Cedar Point was looking for. So there are certainly some things that maybe could have been a little bit more advanced in terms of the movement and animatronics, but no element was left out of the original scope, which again is amazing.
Yes.
Because for anybody working in the themed entertainment or design field, like it's a pretty rare occurrence.
For sure. Yeah, I completely get that. And again, going back to the Copperhead Strike thing, there was something that Adam wanted to do on that JoJo roll that kind of involved like hiding the moonshine under the track. And
yeah, there was like a big blown out corn crib.
Yes. So it's maybe one day we'll see it. Who knows? We'll make it happen.
Yeah. Who knows?
And what have you guys heard from a guest feedback standpoint? I mean, were you there on opening day and kind of standing by the exit and listening to oh my gosh, that was the greatest thing ever. I can't believe Cedar Point created their own Jungle Cruise. I mean, what kind of guest feedback are you guys hearing so far? And, even feedback from the park even.
I was able to go on some limited ride-alongs, and people really enjoyed it. The live action stuff was really incredible. It's really what, brings the whole thing together. I mean, they do some stuff that's pretty daring, I think, within the live action sort of scope of things, that I think this is a lot of what people latched onto. There are a couple of, again, not to give too much away, audio cues in there that have become a little bit of a repeated thing that people like to do. Well, there's just like a wolf howl at some point that people like to emulate, so they'll go by, and if you've ridden it more than once, generally people will do the wolf howl. And I think it's partially carryover from before, but it was something that kind of survived to this iteration that was pretty cool. So
it's kind of like the your Jaws. We're going to be shark bait in 10 minutes, and it's like, yes.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
I've got to ask you guys, and it may be like picking a favorite child, but do you have a favorite scene or a favorite animatronic that you guys have put together for the Snake River expedition?
Okay, so there's a scene where we blow up a building, and I just really like blowing up buildings. You got to blow up a building every few minutes and have it reassemble itself. That's just kind of fun. So yeah, I really enjoyed that one. It's a loud bang. There's smoke. There's motion, and it's just from an animatronic standpoint, it was a lot of fun to figure out and then to see.
Okay. And Brad?
There's kind of a very concentrated area about midway through the ride with a bunch of raccoons that I enjoy. Raccoons are always fun.
Okay, I was going to say, dare I ask why the raccoons are your favorite part, but we'll leave it.
That's another really interesting.
They're mischievous.
They're mischievous, and that was one sort of note we had from Cedar Point is that most of the animals were supposed to be acting as animals. They kind of can get into a little bit of trouble, but the raccoons were the one thing that the note we had is that the raccoons can do whatever they want.
Okay.
The other animals have to be like animals, but raccoons can be as mischievous as they want to be. So that's Cedar Point loves their raccoons and wants them to be fun and mischievous.
Okay. I love it. And Billy, I want to go back to this exploding building. Now that you've brought it up, I have to ask the question. I mean, what is the process of constructing and concepting and, actually manufacturing this exploding building? How do you make it look in such a way where it explodes, but then can reassemble? How difficult is that process?
Well, it's difficult. We and that also involves a live actor, so it has to be safe for a live actor to interact with. So, there are electronic controls that need to be very dialed in for the actor to be able to safely operate that thing. And as in any of the other scenes, it also has to be triggered appropriately, from the boat's presence. And so there are the basic elements of safety and operation that have to go into it that are just a little bit heightened, because of the interactivity there. And then you have to build it and then iterate it several times as you test it and see where the stress points are, and then kind of get it figured out, and then you get on site and there's a lot of dialing in to do there as well. For some reason, it's every time you get anything to where it goes, there are just some unique challenges to getting it working there, as opposed to where you start. And so that one, just repeatability was the main, way to get that dialed in.
Okay. And once the building explodes, how quickly does it reset itself?
A few seconds.
Okay.
It's made from parts that kind of blow outwards and then just kind of collapse back down. So the roof kind of blows off, the sides kind of pooch out, smoke comes out, and then as soon as the boat's back, it only takes a couple of seconds for them to kind of drop back into place.
Very cool. I'm kind of like you. I love the idea of an exploding building and attraction. So it's something you probably got to see to believe.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Well, I need to, this is a question you guys probably can't answer, but it's also my job on this podcast to ask these types of questions. So, what else are you guys currently working on right now? What's next for the Weber Group?
So our biggest project that we're working on currently is, that again, I probably can't really talk much about, but is Lost Island Theme Park in Waterloo, Iowa.
Yes.
So we're the construction managers on that and doing a lot of the theming. All I can say, it's going to be a really, really cool theme park, and we're really excited to get it open.
Yeah.
I think particularly because it is like a true theme park that you don't really see in a lot of like regional seasonal parks. So
especially in Waterloo, Iowa. I mean, yeah. I can't, again, I don't know very much about the Midwest. I can't imagine that Iowa itself, obviously they've got Adventureland out there, they've got Arnold's Park, but they're not a state that's known particularly for its hardcore, immersive themed parks. I mean, So I've been following the construction updates you guys have been doing on this. It looks amazing. I can't wait for it to open. Was that scheduled 2022 or is that 23 or what? Is that
I don't know if the date has been officially announced yet, so I won't say, but
okay.
Hopefully sooner rather than later.
Understood. I hear what you're saying. No other future plans you guys are allowed to talk about with the major regional chain operators, or if you want to wink on the screen and be like, "Hey, there's more coming. We'll talk later." That's fine.
There's always more coming. We do, because we don't just do theme parks. We just finished up a major aquarium project where we were doing the theming in Branson, Missouri, and we've kind of developed a really strong partnership with those guys. And sort of some of the attractions they're doing. So we're continuing to work with them, and I've got some new stuff coming in Branson, Missouri. So that's another really great partner that we have, and looking forward to building some really cool stuff for them. And if you haven't been to the aquarium at the boardwalk in Branson, if you're ever down to Silver Dollar City, and I would definitely stop by and see that. It's a highly themed aquarium. It's pretty cool.
I love it. Well, before we wrap this up, anything else you guys want to mention that, I wasn't smart enough to have the foresight to ask about Snake River Expedition, Weber Group, anything else you guys want to talk about?
I felt it was pretty thorough. Cedar Point was a good partner to work with. They had an idea and an outline, and gave us freedom to do a lot of, what we felt would make it work. And then there's a lot of back and forth with that. Mm-hmm. As you mentioned earlier, COVID gave us more time to air it out and actually physically test some things and go through and experience it, and at least partially while we were kind of working on it, and I think allowed us to get a better product by the time it was done. So that, I would say, was very true.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on that, I mean, Cedar Fair is they're a great client to work with. They've been a really great partner for us. So they've really kind of allowed us to bring the full force of our creativity to bear. So it's been really fun, and we look forward to other projects with them in the future.
I love it. Well, Billy, Brad, thank you guys so much for your time. If you're listening to this podcast and have not gotten up to Cedar Point this season, join me in planning a trip to Cedar Point so we can go and experience Snake River Expedition. It looks amazing. There's videos online that the Weber Group has shared on their social media channels, so be sure to go check those out. But that's going to do it for this week's episode of the Coaster101 podcast. As always, we're on the internet, coaster101.com. We've got some really good articles. And like I mentioned earlier, interviewed Adam McIntyre about Copyright Strike a couple of years ago. Weber Group did the theming on that. So be sure to go check that out. We're also on social media at Coaster101, anywhere you can consume the platform, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok. All the social media channels that everyone's on, we're on too. Make sure you're liking, rating, reviewing, subscribing, telling your friends, telling your enemies, telling other theme park companies that you want us to interview them on the podcast. It really helps us out. And it, if people are listening, it makes this podcast fun. Thanks as always to JM Music Design for our theme music. And we will talk to you all again next week. See ya.